Dear students, I am Dr. Sufyan Ahmad, working as Deputy Librarian in Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Today I am going to discuss a very important topic, library finance and budgeting. So, as you know, finance is the moving force for any organization. To run any organization, there has to maintain a balance between income and expenditure. Similarly, it is essential for the smooth functioning of libraries also. In the case of libraries, the expenditure is always far more than their income. Thus, libraries are regarded as spending institutions. The expenditure of libraries goes on increasing with the improvement and expansion of their services. Their financial demands are recurring in nature. For example, purchase of reading materials, AMC of equipments, stationeries, etc. is needed every year. Library finance includes both the funds appropriate to a library and its expenditure. Library depends heavily on continuous supply of funds for organizing their activities, services and programs. The success of any library depends upon the regular flow of its finance. The foundation of proper financing depends upon the correct and effective estimation of finances. Sources of revenue, as you know, major sources of revenue for libraries are generally number 1 subscription from the members, number 2 endowments and private benefactions, number 3 in case of public libraries it is library cess, then number 4 interest on deposits, then number 5 is government and other grants, and sometimes library gets some fines also for overdue books etc. Then donations or gifts, and then obviously fees received from certain services like reprography etc. And major items of expenditure are number 1 salaries of the staffs. This is the maximum expenditure which accounts for more than 50% of the total expenditure. Then second is purchase of reading materials. This is second largest item of expenditure. Third one is expenditure on processing of documents such as papers and other stationeries etc. Fourth one is AMCs of equipments such as computers, servers, UPS, CCTVs, photocopier machine, intercom, library automation software etc. Then fifth point is communications such as postage, telephone, transportation etc. Then contingencies for miscellaneous works. Financial estimations are different methods used for working out financial estimation for a library. These may be number 1 per capita methods. In this method a minimum amount is fixed per head and accordingly financial estimations are prepared. This type of estimate can be used for public libraries where the literate persons or adults served is taken into considerations. The UGC Library Committee in 1957 suggested for a provision of rupees 15 and rupees 200 per students and per teacher respectively for university and college libraries. Whereas, Kothari Commission it is rupees 25 per student and rupees 300 per teacher. Ranganathan also suggested that per capita expenditure on university and college libraries should be rupees 20 per student and rupees 300 per teacher, and rupees 10 per student should be made available in schools for the libraries. For public libraries, Ranganathan suggested 50 paise per capita expenditure. The second method is proportional method. A certain proportion of the general budget of a state or institution is recommended for providing library service under this method. The proportional method of financial estimation presupposes that the library authorities provide adequate finances to the libraries out of their regular budget, and that a particular minimum limit is fixed. A generally used measure of adequate support is the percentage of the institutional budget which is allocated for library purposes. The University Education Commission had recommended that 6.5% of the budget of a university would be reasonable for its library. The University Education Commission also suggested that the expenditure could vary from 6.5% to 10% depending on the stage of each university library. The majority of the universities in India hardly spend 3% of their total budget on their libraries. In India, various types of standards have been recommended for the finance of public library system. These are, according to Dr. Ranganathan, either 10% of the total budget or 6% of the educational budget of a local, state or central government, as the case may be, should be earmarked for public library purposes. As per the working group on libraries, the provision for public libraries should be such that the annual expenditure thereon is in no case less than 1.5% of the total annual expenditure on education. Then we have another method, that is details method. Under this method, while preparing the budget for a library, all the items of expenditure are considered, which include salaries of staff, reading materials, binding and repairing, electricity consumptions, postage and stationery, contingencies, etc. Library budget. So, library budget is the central aspect of library finance, which serves as an instrument of control, communication, coordination, evaluation and motivation. Library budget is a statement of income and expenditure which provides guidance for spending the appropriate funds through a period of time. Hence, library budget is the systematically prepared statement of estimated revenue and expenditure of the library for a period of time, usually for 1 year. Budget is the guide to incur expenditure for different operations and activities of the library throughout the year. The general principle regarding the budget is the estimated expenditure should not exceed the revenue. In other words, the income and the expenditure of the library should balance each other. Budget is a planned estimation of expenditure within the available income. In the absence of such planning in the financial aspects, it is not possible to spend money in a productive way. It is always essential to identify the things which are most necessary out of the list of requirements. Similarly, in the case of library, it may need many things, but it is necessary to select those which are essential and necessary for the immediate future in view of its objectives. Therefore, planned expenditure enables us to derive the maximum satisfaction in our endeavour. Besides, it is also necessary to limit our expenditure to the available income. While preparing a budget, one has to take into consideration the previous year's expenditure, proposed new programs and schemes also. It is also necessary to take standards on various aspects for estimating expenditure. Sometimes the actual may be different from the standard figures. However, standards provide a rough estimation. The budget for different items should essentially be considered and analysis be made on the basis of the previous year's expenditure. Now, we will discuss budgetary methods. There are few methods for preparing library budgets, which include those traditional methods also which are practiced by many of the libraries, and more innovative ones also that have found their way in the libraries in recent years. Line by line method or budget, it is the most common type of budgetary method, which is the one method that divides the items of expenditure line by line into broad categories such as books and journals, salaries and allowances of the staff of the library, equipment supplies, expenditure, capital expenditure, contingencies, etc., with further subdivisions of each of these broad categories. This is the usual traditional method which prepares the current budget by taking into account past expenditure on each of the above items. In this type of budget, a small increase, say for example 5 to 10% for each major item of expenditure of the previous year's allocation is done, assuming that all current programs are as good and necessary. Line by line method of budget does not go into the evaluation of activities and services of performance and also does not suggest any future projection. The advantage of this method is that it is relatively easy to prepare, present and understand. It moves in the same manner as in the past year without any forward push. It is inflexible also, so that funds earmarked for a particular item cannot be spent for any other purpose. For example, financial rules would not permit shifting of expenditure from one head to another. Another budget method is programming budget. This method is the new concept of idea of budgeting for different programs of the library. This method does not estimate the expenditure of the library on the basis of individual item of expenditure like line by line method. The focus in this method is on the activities of the library, and the funds are to be earmarked for programs or services that the library plans to provide. Hence, the budget is prepared on the basis of the cost of programs. Each year, the library can decide whether a program has to continue, get modified or deleted. The budget is prepared accordingly. For preparing programming budget, a library may group its major programs or functions which may correspond to the organizational structure of the library like administrative services, technical services, reader services, etc. Each of these services may be organized through various departments of the library. In this type of budget, provision is made for various activities of each department. This method gives an opportunity to the heads of various departments to measure their requirements and watch their expenditure. Then we have another types of budget which is called performance budget. This method is similar to programming budget, but the emphasis is shifted from programs to performance. In this method, the expenditure is based on the performance of activities and the stress is laid down upon operational efficiency. The careful collection of quantitative data on all the activities over a period of time is required in this method. To measure the performance of activities, the cost benefit analysis management techniques are used. For example, data on the number of books acquired, classified and catalogued, actual man hours for doing the entire processing work, etc., are collected to determine manpower and materials to perform the task. This method measures only quantity, not quality of the performance of activities, which is rather difficult to measure in terms of money costs. In fact, budget allocation for a service institutions like a library has little direct relationship to the degree of satisfaction of users received from the library services which are provided to them. Then we have another budget method, that is PPBS budget. PPBS is planning, programming, budgeting system, which is another method which combines the best of both program and performance budget. The focus is on planning. It begins with the establishment of goals and objectives and ends with the formulation of programs or services. The aspect of control of measurement is also the central aspect of this method, as it was central to performance budget. This method combines the functions of planning activities, programs and services, translating them into tangible projects, and finally presents the requirement in budgetary terms. Then we have zero based budget, Conceptually, the zero based budget is similar to PPBS, but does not take into account of what happened in the past, but emphasize in the current activities. Every program and activity of the library is described in detail, and for them the financial requirement is worked out without any reference to the past. In other words, the request for financial support has to be put afresh every year. These methods of budgeting are of recent origin, and their supporters claim that they are better and superior to the conventional methods. These methods present a more readily understandable view of budgeting requirements of the activities and services of the libraries. It is only in recent years that some attention has been given to these modern methods. Now, we will discuss objectives of the library budget. And the first objective is to present a statement of estimated revenues and expenditure, which is basically the financial situation for a given period of time. Second one is to serve as a plan for the efficient and effective coordination of resources and expenditures during a particular period of time. Third objective is to present details regarding the services that is to be given at a future date. Fourth is to serve as a basic financial control mechanism. Fifth objective is to serve as a forecast of the means of carrying the plan into effect, a current guide, cost summary of operations, etc. Sixth one is to serve as a tool for the management, and finally, the seventh one is to form the basis for the formulation of future policy. Procedures for the preparing of budget. The budget should be prepared very carefully and not haphazardly. All the requirements should be incorporated into an annual estimate based on the policy decisions which are taken from time to time throughout the year. To prepare the library budget, we should keep some important points in our mind. So, number one is compare the estimated budget with previous expenditure. Number two, the estimated budget should be in accordance with the proposed program, and number three, it should also be as per the standards and norms widely accepted. For ensuring a faultless budget, a proper procedure has to be followed. The exact and faultless budget depends upon successful implementation of various plans. Then there are certain tips for successful budget making. These are: number one, a budget file should be maintained every year containing different heads of the library expenditure. Number two, all the policy decisions which are taken from time to time throughout the year and other financial requirements should be included in the budget file. Number three, the budget file should be based on object classification as mentioned above. In other words, each estimate must be detailed one, and the minute point should be taken into consideration before an estimate is actually sent finally to the competent authority for its approval. Number four, if there are other departments or other branch libraries are associated with central library, then all the reports pertaining to these department or branch libraries should also be included. Number fifth, the person who is entrusted to prepare the budget should carefully perform the accumulation work so that there is an exact idea to what total amount is required for each operating unit of service. Number six, the accumulation work should also be done in the same way for the source of income also, if any. Number seven, then final budget amount can be proposed after deducting the income from the estimated expenditure. Number 8, a good budget should also contain the ways and means for procuring additional revenues to meet the deficit. Now, there are certain factors which should be considered in budget making. Number 1, while preparing a budget, the type of organization must be in mind. Number 2, the size of the organization is also very important. Number 3, it is also important to keep in mind whether it is part of general budget of the organization or it is independent budget exclusively for the library. Number 4, one should also keep in mind the types of users, document collection and services being offered by the library, etc. Now, what are the items in the library budget? So, there are some items which should be included in the library budgets. So, number 1, books, which includes e-books. Then number 2, periodicals, which includes e-journals and databases. Number 3, back volumes of periodicals. Number 4, building. Number 5, furnitures. Number 6, salaries. Number 7, stationery. Number 8, binding materials. Number 9, equipment and machinery. Number 10, rent, if any, if it is being paid for the building, etc. Then number 11, insurance. Number 12, electricity charges. Number 13, postage and transportation, and number 14, miscellaneous. The item of expenditure may be broadly divided into recurring and non-recurring. The items of expenditure such as salaries, office equipment, supplies, telephones, postage, stationery and miscellaneous items which are of a regular nature come under the recurring category. The expenditure on those items is inevitable and unavoidable for a running institution. The items furniture, equipment and erection of building or development of a portion of building are stated under non-recurring or capital outlay. Those are required once in a few years' time. Though items like books and periodicals form part of regular expenditure, they may vary from year to year depending on the availability of money in the budget. This classification of items of expenditure may also be shown on the basis of the object, that is based on service rendered, materials acquired and facilities provided. It may also be shown on a department wise basis such as the technical section, the periodical section, etc. There are some general standards. The University Grants Commission has suggested that 50% of the total university library budget should be spent on books and other reading materials and 50% on the library staff. In this regard, Dr. Ranganathan has suggested that the total budget should be distributed as on staff 50% and books and other materials 40% and for others it is 10%. So, now I am going to conclude today's discussion. Budgeting is an effective management tool. During budget making, changing needs and resources of the library should be reviewed as well as assessed. Careful planning, accounting and control are necessary for budgeting. The librarian has to examine the needs of the library on a continuous basis. Once the need for more funds is recognized, then the librarian has to make an attempt to acquire the necessary funds required to support the existing needs of the library. Budget is an extremely important item, therefore, the librarian must guide and participate in the formulation of the budget. Attempts should be made to justify each component of the budget with reasonable and adequate justifications. This is all for today. I hope students have find this lecture useful. We will meet in the next lecture. Till then, take care and bye.